Have you ever noticed this? You see someone on the street, suddenly staring up at the sky, and without even thinking, you look up too. Or maybe a certain outfit, food, or trend blows up, and if you're honest, you don't totally get the appeal. But somehow, you still go along with it because everyone else is. And maybe the strangest moment of all is this. You're absolutely sure you're right about something. But the second everyone around you disagrees, you go quiet. We all like to believe we're rational, independent, logical, but the truth is, our judgments and behavior are shaped by other people. Far more than we realize. Today, we're diving into that part of human nature. The psychological force known as conformity. And more importantly, just how powerful it can be, how dangerous it can become, and how we can keep ourselves from getting swallowed by it. When people talk about conformity, there's one classic experiment that always comes up. In 1951, psychologist Solomon Asch ran what became one of the most famous studies in social psychology. Picture this. You walk into a lab and sit down with 7 other participants. The researcher shows the group 2 cards. One card has a single line on it. The other has 3 lines labeled A, B, and C. Your task is simple. Pick the line that matches the original. That's it. No trick. No complicated reasoning. Just compare the lengths. It's the kind of question a child could answer. But here's what you don't know. The other 7 people in the room aren't real participants. They're all part of the experiment. At first, everything feels normal. On the first round, everyone gives the correct answer. Same thing on the second round. Then on the third round, something shifts. The correct answer is obviously B. But the first person says A. Then the second person says A. Then the third. Then the fourth. By the time it gets to you, the room has already spoken. So what do you say? Do you trust your own eyes? Or do you go along with the group? Asch's results were shocking. When people answered alone, the error rate was less than 1%. But when the group intentionally gave the wrong answer, 37% of participants went along with it. Let that sink in. On a task with an obvious answer, more than a third of people denied what they clearly saw just to match the group. And it gets even wilder. About 3 out of 4 participants conformed at least once. This wasn't random, and it wasn't about intelligence. It was evidence that the human brain often treats social harmony as more urgent than being correct. In other words, staying connected to the group can matter more to us than telling the truth. So why are we so easily pulled in by other people? Psychologists usually point to 2 big forces. The first is called normative influence. The second is informational influence. Normative influence is about social pressure. It's when you know the group is wrong, or at least suspect they are. But you still go along because you don't want to stand out. You don't want the awkward silence. You don't want the judgment. You don't want to be the difficult one in the room. And that fear runs deeper than most people think. Our brains are wired to experience social rejection as a real threat. In fact, studies have found that social exclusion can activate some of the same brain regions involved in physical pain. So when you speak against the group, it can feel bad in a very literal way. Not just emotionally, almost physically. That's why so many people choose agreement over honesty. Not because they're weak, but because disagreement hurts. Then there's informational influence. This happens when the situation feels uncertain, confusing, or unclear. When we don't know what's right, we look to other people as a shortcut. We assume they must know something we don't. Think back to the early days of the pandemic. People were panic buying masks, medicine, and household supplies. A lot of us didn't have clear information. We felt anxious, uncertain. So when we saw everyone else rushing to buy the same things, our brains filled in the blank. There must be a reason. If that many people are doing it, they probably know something. That's informational conformity. And when social pressure and uncertainty come together, conformity becomes incredibly powerful. This isn't just something that affects trends, shopping habits, or awkward group conversations. In extreme situations, it can cost lives. One of the most tragic examples is the 1986 Challenger disaster. The night before the launch, NASA engineers warned that the rubber O-rings might fail in the cold. They were deeply concerned. They raised serious objections. But the people making the final decision were under a different kind of pressure. There had been concerns before, and launches had still gone forward. Other people in the system weren't eager to delay the mission. The atmosphere was pushing toward action, not caution. And in that kind of environment, doubt becomes dangerous. Not because the doubt is wrong, but because voicing it makes you the problem. So the launch moved forward. 73 seconds after liftoff, the shuttle exploded. 7 astronauts lost their lives. That's what conformity can do when the need to stay aligned with the group becomes stronger than the courage to say, stop. And this doesn't only happen in huge institutions. It happens every day, in classrooms, where students know the answer, but don't raise their hand because no one else is speaking. In meetings, where someone has a better idea, but stays quiet because the room already seems decided. In friend groups, in workplaces, in families. Again and again, truth gets buried under the pressure to belong. And that matters because so much of what moves the world forward begins with a minority opinion, a different voice, an uncomfortable objection, a person willing to say, I don't think we should do this. So can we ever become completely free from conformity? Probably not. And honestly, that makes sense. Human beings are social creatures. We need connection. We need belonging. We survive through relationships. So the goal isn't to become immune to influence. The goal is to become aware of it. To notice when it's happening. To catch ourselves before we confuse the crowd's confidence with the truth. One of the best ways to protect a group from blind conformity is surprisingly simple. Make sure someone is allowed to disagree. In organizations, this is sometimes called playing devil's advocate. One person is given the role of challenging the dominant opinion on purpose. Not to be negative, not to create conflict, but to keep the group from sliding into groupthink, that dangerous state where everyone starts thinking the same way, because no one wants to question the mood in the room. A second strategy is to build in a pause. The next time you're in a situation where the majority opinion feels overwhelming, stop for just 5 seconds. Just 5, and ask yourself one question. Do I actually believe this? Or am I just reacting to the pressure in the room? That tiny pause can do something powerful. It can separate your real judgment from the group's momentum. And finally, protect yourself from informational conformity. Whenever you feel the urge to follow the crowd, because you don't have enough information, take that feeling as a signal, not a command, a signal. It means this is the moment to slow down, to step back, to look things up for yourself, to think alone before you decide together. We may never stop being influenced by other people, but we can get better at choosing when to follow and when to resist. And maybe that's what real courage looks like. Not shouting the loudest, not winning every argument, but having the strength to look in a different direction when everyone else is staring at the same thing. So what about you? When the pressure starts building, when the room is leaning one way, when the crowd seems certain, what will you choose? Because somewhere, even now, another wave of conformity is already beginning. And maybe the real question is this: when it does, will you think with the crowd? Or will you think for yourself?